there's stuff that every single person is doing on a daily basis that they don't need to do, that can be made redundant, then we automate before we outsource. And I think this is another reason why so many businesses are so inefficient.
Welcome everyone to the Closing Table Podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler, and today I am sitting down with Jess Lenouvel. Jess wants to transform the real estate industry. She was a real estate agent for over 15 years and built a multiple seven-figure business. She then transitioned to founding her company, The Listings Lab, where she helps six-figure and low seven-figure real estate agents double their revenue without burnout and without old-school tactics. Jess is also the author of More Money, Less Hustle, Becoming the Seven-Figure Real Estate Agent, and today she shares with us the biggest mistakes she thinks agents are making, who should and shouldn't be on YouTube as a real estate agent, and the mindset shift that she thinks agents need to make to find greater success. So without further ado, let's talk to Jess. Jess, thank you so much for joining me today. You were in real estate for 14 years, and then you transitioned into coaching, and you changed your business entirely. And you talk about it in your book, More Money, Less Hustle, Becoming the Seven-Figure Real Estate Agent. And I read it, and there you have this very visceral moment where you knew things had to change. Can you talk us kind of through this light bulb moment where you knew your career had to change?
Yeah, this was really early on in my relationship with my husband, who we've been married now for 11 years, and he's still I'm still obsessed with him. And I had built something that I think from the outside looked really sexy. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, like the volume that she's doing. I think the first time I hit seven figures, I did it as a solo agent. And it was a lot. And it was in a very short period of time. I went from being a low six-figure agent to a seven-figure agent in about 6 months. And so because we kind of cracked the digital marketing code, it snowballed. And it kind of got to a point where I was so burnt out and so tired that I wasn't the best version of me. And I didn't really have a lot of myself to give to anyone else around me at the time. And the one thing that we had kept that we were really being really careful about was date night. We were like, we need to have a date night. We need to not become those people who are just got married and don't know each other. So we were out for date night. Earlier that day, I had made a bazillion calls. I had just left a bunch of messages, followed up with a lot of leads, and digital marketing at the time is very different than the way that we do it now. But I had just done a ton of outreach. And you know what happens when you leave a million messages? People don't really listen to the messages, but they call the number back. And I had an Apple Watch at the time, which I don't anymore. It wasn't good for my mental health. And so I'm sitting at the table, and I have my phone next to me, of course. Of course, the phone's on the table. I've got my Apple Watch on that's buzzing and buzzing and buzzing and buzzing and constantly distracting me. I'm trying to have a conversation with my husband about our future. We were talking about where we wanted to live. We were actually talking about our reality now, which, we've lived in the Bahamas for 3 years, and that was always kind of the dream. And we were talking about what that would look like, and wouldn't it be amazing if one day we lived somewhere tropical, and what do we want? And right in the middle of we're having this conversation, it was almost my brain didn't click in, and it was just this immediate reaction. And I think this happens to a lot of people, where my phone rang and it lit up. Not only did my watch buzz, but my phone lit up, and I could see that it was a phone call. I spit the spaghetti that was in my mouth into my napkin, picked up the phone, and walked away from the table, in the middle of a conversation. And I came back, and I remember coming around the corner of the restaurant after I'd realized that it was a call that I didn't need to take. Come back into the restaurant, and the look on my poor husband's face was the only thing that I could think was, what he's thinking right now is what have I signed up for? Is this really my life? And I realized that all of the reasons why I got into real estate none of those things were the reality of what I had. I'm a really big believer that most people get into real estate for like 3 reasons. You want this like promise of this unlimited income potential. You think that you get to set your own schedule, and you want to help people. I think most people who get into real estate like working with people. And the reality is that a lot of people, when they don't have the business set up really correctly, they end up actually not having any of those things because you become the bottleneck of your business. And if you don't do something, then it doesn't get done. And even people who build teams, they think in theory that they need to leverage, but they don't ever really learn how to build systems and how to leverage properly. So they just end up babysitting a whole bunch of adults. So that was kind of the moment where I realized, wow, I've got to change the structure of my business. It doesn't matter that we're quote unquote making all this money when I don't get to live a life that makes the money worth it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I mean, when I listened to that part of the book, I was like, that is visceral. I think anybody hearing that story is like, yeah, something had to change.
Yeah.
And so you wrote about essentially looking at other forms of business that were not necessarily real estate
Yeah.
based, and then kind of taking all of that you learned and then applying it to real estate to create, systems and operating procedures, and kind of cloning yourself in a way, and then that was able to kind of release you from some of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, the first thing I did was I looked in the real estate world. And
Mm-hmm.
we all know that real estate is relatively archaic and that, traditional real estate does tend to be very old school. So I couldn't find the answers that I was looking for. And then and I think it was late to the game, I read the 4-Hour Work Week, and I was like, okay, so if this kind of efficiency can exist in something like drop shipping, which obviously I'm not going to do, but I can kind of take the same principles and look at the 4-Hour Work Week was just the beginning. It kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there were a lot of other industries that were doing this really well. And so I just started kind of being obsessed with other verticals, other industries, other ways of creating efficiency in business, and how, tech companies and corporations and drop shipping and internet businesses and things like that were creating so much efficiency and so much automation within the actual business itself without so much human interaction in every single tiny step of the way. And so once I got that, then I had to figure out how it was going to work in a real estate business, which when you've been in the business for a long time, we all wear these like real estate hats. We all have these really bad habits that have been ingrained in us from day one because we've been told that that's how you do things and that's how everybody does it. So I had a lot of conditioning that I had to break. But the one thing that I took from the 4-Hour Work Week was eliminate, automate, outsource. And I still use it today. I still teach it today. And I think that order is so, so important because there's stuff that every single person is doing on a daily basis that they don't need to do, that can be made redundant. Then we automate before we outsource. And I think this is another reason why so many businesses are so inefficient, because we've been taught from the big red book since we were baby agents that as soon as you hit your bandwidth, you hire an administrator. Now that made a lot of sense in the 80s and the 90s. But today we have all of this technology that if you have it set up correctly can remove the need for so much human touch so that you leave the human touch for the things that actually need the human touch. So there's a lot of people too that are paying full-time administrators or have multiple administrators that are paying them $20, $30 an hour for a job that a piece of technology can do for $500 a year. So not only is it time inefficient, it's also super financially inefficient. So I would rather have that full-time administrator, that you're paying $20 or $30 an hour doing something that is going to net $1,000 an hour, so that there's a real, true, tangible ROI on not only your time, but also on every person on your team's time. So I just became obsessed with efficiency, and we became really, really efficient. And we approach our marketing exactly the same way. 100% of our real estate business when I was still selling was generated online. So it wasn't one of those things that I was out there door knocking, cold calling, flyering, those kind of things. We didn't do that. Everything that we did, we generated through online sources. And it became almost like a machine, but that the clients never felt like they were in a machine.
Right. I think what you said is really cool because I think most people's first instinct is like, oh, I need to hire somebody. I
Yeah.
need more bodies in chairs or whatever. And like what you're saying is to maybe like take a step back and what can you automate? Like
Mhm.
what can technology do for you? I think we think of like, oh, AI is writing movies now or whatever, but we're not like thinking about like the simple things that it can do of send messages, DMs, those types of things, or rather have like scripts in emails so that those things are automated.
And I really think, like, if we just go to the marketing side of it, right? I think that we've been taught that we need to make a certain number of phone calls and we need to send a certain number of emails. And I've literally watched high producing agents sit at a desk and retype some version of the same email 10 times in a day.
Hmm.
And I think, like, I don't even think that they see the inefficiency in it. Whereas, like, pretty much everything from contract to close on any deal can be completely automated and doesn't really need a human to touch it. So if you think about that, how much time you're spending, or how much you're even spending like through a transaction coordinator, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of things that are really traditionally something that was a value add or that everybody needed that really is becoming kind of obsolete because of the tech that we have. So imagine how many things that the average agent is manually doing on a daily basis. The other reason why this is so important is, I tell this story. My mom absolutely hates it. So my mom has been in real estate for 35 years, maybe more than that now. She got her license when I was in junior kindergarten. So I was like a tiny baby. She's like, yep, I'm going to get into real estate. My mom's always been very entrepreneurial. And so to this day, I will call her and say, hey, mom, like, what are you doing? She lives in Toronto. And she'll be like, oh, hey, honey, I am, driving this deposit check to this brokerage. It drives me bananas because me, who's like obsessed with efficiency and maximizing time, and, my mom's like 70. Why is she like at this point in her career, why is she driving a check? And so I joke with her. I'm like, oh, great. So next week you're going to apply to McDonald's, $15 an hour, right? She hates me for it. And my mom and I have a great relationship, but I'm a little spicy with her. And she's like, I hate it when you say that. I'm like, yeah, but you could have paid a courier $30 to deliver that for you. It actually could have been automated. Everything could have just been like put at the front door, and it could have, a system could have sent a message to a courier, ordered the courier, had the courier come and pick it up, charge your credit card for $30, and it would have saved you 2 hours. Now, if your time is worth $1,000 an hour, you have just lost $1,970 by spending that 2 hours driving around. Now, the other thing too, which is one of the reasons why I wrote More Money, Less Hustle, is there's a lot of younger people with kids in real estate who are driving the check 2 hours. And I'll say to someone, would you pay $30 to be able to spend that 2 hours with your kid? And every single person would say yes. And so, it's not only, there's two different ways that we can use or spend that time. One of them is to invest the time into a high leverage, high value activity to create a higher ROI. The other is to invest that time into the intangible things in your life. And I say all the time, like at the very end, we are not going to be, laying on our deathbed and thinking about that deal that didn't go through. We're going to be thinking about the memories and, the number one regret. If you've read The 5 Regrets of the Dying, it's a great book. It says that one of the top regrets that everybody has is that they work too much and that they didn't spend enough time with their loved ones and on their hobbies and traveling and whatever it is that they wanted to do in their life. They didn't get to it because they spent so much time working. And I think real estate agents are the extreme of that, right? Why would we pay someone if we can do it ourselves? Well, because your time is worth more than $15 an hour. And if it's not, then why would you take on the stress of running a volatile business?
Right. It's kind of it eludes me why it's not the first thought for many people. And maybe it's because when they're starting out, they are starting out with maybe zero capital most of the time.
Yeah.
Um,
and you have to invest something, so you invest time.
Yeah. And so many people get into real estate so that they can spend time with their families, right? So they can have that flexible schedule, right? And then it kind of ends up reversing itself.
And then they forget that that was always something that we were working towards, right? Certainly. And the other thing too is, when you get a real estate license, or you get allowed to sell real estate, none of us were taught how to run businesses. None of us were taught efficiency. We were all taught how not to get sued and how to make sure the contracts were okay, right? So I think at the end of the day, a lot of this is not second nature to a lot of people. What I find is, even like with our clients that we work with, if this is someone's third or fourth business, or even second or third business, they tend to be a lot more efficient minded, and they tend to be more successful faster, because they've learned these kind of mindset conditioning parts of business in other industries, and they're bringing that to real estate. Now, I worked at a running store before I got my real estate license, right? So I had to figure this all out kind of on my own. But I think that a lot of people who come from corporate, or who, have raised kids and then gotten their license, or who get their license young, a lot of those people don't have that skill set, and therefore they struggle a little bit with the efficiency and the business side of it, that we're really never taught. So you have to kind of search for the information and kind of self-teach, which can be really daunting for a lot of people when you're starting a business and you're having to learn the industry as well.
So you have your coaching program, the Listings Lab.
Yep.
Is this usually where you start with people at this kind of automation level, buying your time back?
It depends on where they are in the business, and it depends on what the biggest pain point in their business is. We have a couple of different layers of programs. So the Listings Lab is like our core marketing program, and it's like the umbrella name of the whole company. But for people in real estate, one of the very first things that we try to determine is the biggest pain point money or time? Because a lot of the time, if the pain point is money, you don't care about buying back the time. You need to make more money. And so the Listings Lab solves the money problem. It basically creates a very efficient system to bring in inbound clients through digital platforms, social media, paid traffic. We go through essentially like the full training of like human psychology of how to take someone from stranger to inbound client. So all of that is for if the biggest pain point is money. Now, once you get to a certain level, we usually find that's about, $300,000-$400,000 a year. We see it, and it depends on the person, but we see it's not that I actually can't have more clients. And I always ask someone, if I dropped 50 clients on your head, would that be good or bad? And if you say bad, and I have no time as it is, and I don't know what I would do, then we have to buy back the time, create the systems, create the efficiency, hire the right people, start building out what ultimately is going to be the structure of any real business. because when you're a solo agent, and I don't mean this in any kind of a disparaging way, when you're a solo agent and you're doing everything yourself, you kind of have like a successful hustle, but it's not really a business yet.
Right.
Once you actually start creating leverage and you start creating scale in your business, that's when like the business part really starts to kick in. And so we have a different program that works on the, okay, so you're not a startup anymore. And we're ready to like kind of take you from 6 to 7 figures with the freedom that you actually want. Because if you're a solo agent, you have to do everything yourself, right? There's no other person to do it. It's you and tech.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like the biggest problem that we solve in the listings lab. Then in our 7-figure agent program, short is 7FA, in our 7FA program, it's really, really geared around systems, efficiencies, bringing in that technology so that we can then have the marketing work. I think so often people get to a certain level of their business and they'll like, I have people who are like, I want to learn marketing from you. I'm like, great. What if it works? Like, do you have the capacity and the systems and the bandwidth between you and your team currently for the marketing to really work the way that you want it to work? And the answer for most people is no. So we have to make that space. It's kind of like going on a shopping spree, but refusing to get it to let anything go out of your closet. And then
Mm.
where are you going to put it? It's going to end up on the floor, right? It's the same thing with clients. You have to create the space in order to be able to handle that influx of clients. Because when the marketing works, you have to be able to service those people. Otherwise, your reputation kind of goes in the toilet. So it's always kind of like chicken and the egg, where we have to figure out, is it a money issue or is it a time issue?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to look at it. And how do you recommend for like agents who are like trying to stay ahead of it, right? So if
Mhm.
they're like, okay, I think I might be ready for a team. I think I've automated everything enough. Like, how do they stay ahead of like the burnout?
If you've automated enough and you've created enough efficiency in your business, you won't burn out, right?
Okay.
And I think
Yeah.
that like most of the people who we work with who are at that multi 7-figure level, they're not in production anymore. They're not running the team and being the CEO of this like little company and working with all the clients. And I think that this is something that fundamentally is broken about most teams. Is most teams that we initially audit, the team lead is still the top producer. What's the point in having a team? You would be better off and more profitable if you only worked with the clients that you worked with and you didn't have all the expenses for everything else, right? A lot of people, and I have a coach that I worked with years ago, who used to have this analogy that he used, that you have an ego account and you have a bank account, and you can't fill both of them at the same time. And so most people who are running teams are filling only the ego account and they're not filling the bank account. The business itself isn't financially efficient because they're still the rainmaker. And that's ultimately the opposite of what teams should look like. We have an agent who we've been working with for a couple of years. She's got a great team. She's completely out of production. She's on her honeymoon in Japan right now. And her team is like running, doing its thing. She has an admin. She's got partner agents on her team. They do all of the production. And what she's in charge of is making sure that everything runs smoothly, and training, support, ongoing mentorship, and making sure that she's focused on the business and not working in the business. And so that ultimately is a real leader and a real CEO, whereas the majority of team leads that we see in the real estate industry are not actually leading the way that they should.
You kind of talk about this in your book. You said something that has really stuck with me, that if they don't let go of their ego, they essentially become the assistant to everybody else
Mhm.
in their business. Like if they have to have their like hand in every pot, and And that really stuck with me, and I think is kind of what you're getting at here.
For sure. And I think that that happens a lot where people get into this mentality of this is my business. If I want it done, or if this person doesn't have the bandwidth to do it, I have to do it. But your time as the visionary or the CEO, or however you want to like label yourself as like the business owner, your time is the most valuable when you are innovating and building partnerships and recruiting and working on marketing. Like there are certain things within the company that are the highest leverage activities, and those are your activities. Your activities aren't following up with paperwork, or because no one on your team wants to go and show property on a Friday night, you go and do it. Right? That's not really true leadership. And I think that the expectations and the roles and responsibilities when people are onboarded onto your team are usually pretty loosey-goosey. The other thing is that most people in real estate are really bad at hiring, because we like to hire people who are like us. But the last thing that you need on your team is another you. You need someone who is good at all the things that you're not good at. And then people wonder, well, I've hired these people and I thought we were like best friends, and then they took everything from me and they left. Well, because you hired yourself, and how long would you have worked for you? Right? And so the roles, the skills, the whatever testing you do on the front end of a hire, you're really ultimately looking for someone who is very, very different than you are. And it's a fine balance between skill and capacity and capability and personality and long-term vision. And all of these things have to kind of fit. So often what we see is a solo agent who hires out of desperation. They're like, I am completely at my bandwidth. My paperwork's a mess. Everything's chaos. I'm going to hire this administrator, pay this person $20 an hour to clean it up. Well, 3 months later, then that person says it didn't work out. That person wasn't the right person. Well, chances are that person wasn't not the right person. You did not set that person up for success. If you, the CEO of the company, can't clean up your own chaos, how can you expect someone that you pay $20 an hour to do that for you? When you hire, there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with it, which is having the systems, having the standard operating procedures, setting that person up for success, which is why you can't hire in desperation, because you have to be able to document and delegate and train properly for every role on your team in order for those people to be effective. So that's why there's so much turnover on most teams, is because it's actually a leadership problem and it's a systems problem as opposed to a people problem.
Yeah, you wrote about that in your book as well, and I really enjoyed that section. How do you think people can get better at hiring, other than just to like not wait until they're desperate?
Yeah, I think that it's a skill, and I think that you need to learn the skill. Like I'll give you an example. A hire that we see all the time that 100% doesn't work out is the agent who's like, okay, I know that I need to be on social media, but I don't have time to do it, or they don't value it the way that they should be valuing it. And they're like, I'm going to hire this kid, and I'm just going to hire this kid, and this kid's going to do it. I'm going to pay this kid, $500 to $1,000 a month, and they're going to handle all my social media. And then 6 months later, they're like, we've gotten nothing from our social media. I'm like, you literally hired an 18-year-old to manage your business's marketing. Just because these people grew up with phones in their hands doesn't mean that they know how to market a business. Like, marketing is literally the lifeblood of your business, and you've treated it as though it's nothing. And so that's a hire that we see all the time that never works. Or they hire like the cheapest company out there to just create a bunch of infographics in Canva and throw them on Instagram and expect that they're going to get a bunch of business from it. And that's really just not how any of these platforms really work. So I think that sometimes it's understanding the values and being able to assign values to different things in a more accurate way. The way that I look at it and what we always teach is that the marketing is like the last thing that you outsource, that you keep that marketing. It is the voice of your business, and you outsource client delivery, customer service, all of those things that really, I think traditionally, because we've looked at ourselves as salespeople, we've forgotten that like those are actually not the highest value activities. That's just the delivery of the product. And that your business, yes, you want to be able to service those people at a high level and get the referrals from them. But referrals are the icing. Your marketing is the cake. And you've got to be able to, if you want an unlimitedly scalable business, you're not going to get that in the time frame that you want it just through referrals. So we have to be able to prioritize and look at what are the things that are actually going to be of the highest value for the person, like the figurehead of the business. And the face, the brand, the marketing, the messaging, all of that comes from the leader of the team and can't come from like some 18-year-old student that is doing it part-time while going to school.
Totally. You hit on a couple of things that I was going to ask about, which was like marketing mistakes and things like that, which is so great. But I the referral thing stuck out to me in your book too, because I talk to a lot of agents and they're very proud of their referral business, and I think they should be. Mm-hmm. But it is really interesting that you say, you know, that can't be your only marketing, and I would agree to that as an outsider, because the referral business, it seems like it would eventually have kind of like the final circle, you know?
So yeah, the new data that's come out says that you actually lose 20% of your database every 8.5 years. Mm. So you will have 20% churn on your database every 8.5 years. And that's people passing away, people moving, people who just decide that they're not going to move and they're in their forever place, people who come into financial trouble. So you have to, if you want your business to continue to grow, you have to be able to bring in new business. And, you know, I do think that getting referrals is something that is something that people should be proud of. What I don't think that people should be proud of is that 100% of their business is referral. Because if 100% of your business is referral, you don't actually really have a business. Because think about some of the big companies out there that even provide services or anything. Every single one of those companies that you think about or admire, they all market, and they've all built a brand, and they all have to bring in new customers on a regular basis. Exponential growth in a business, it doesn't matter what the market is doing, is always possible. The people who we're seeing that are really struggling with any kind of a market shift are the people who rely only on referrals. And so I think a lot of the time, and there's going to be situations too where your sphere just gets tapped out. And so being able to, yes, get those referrals. I like to create a business plan that the referrals are extra, they're bonus, right? But everything else that is being brought in can be primarily automated. And all of that marketing and all of that psychology can be just built into your marketing, but will create essentially the foundation of the amount of business that you need or the amount of business that you want to be bringing in like year over year. Like for even without running paid traffic, you know, someone who uses social media well can bring in anywhere from like 3 to 10 deals a month from organic social media alone. And you don't have to have a large audience to do that. We have clients in our programs who are doing hundreds and hundreds of deals a year from Instagram. But it's about understanding the psychology of the stranger to client journey, and not doing at all what anyone else online is doing. You have to break through the noise, and there's so much noise in real estate marketing. Everybody's doing and saying and looking exactly the same, and expecting that they're going to get results where and I mean, if you do what everyone else is doing, you're going to get average results. You're going to get the results that everyone else gets. And then everyone's always shocked that they're not getting absolutely amazing results from the effort that they're putting in when they look like a carbon copy of every other agent in their market.
So how do you recommend people like determine like how to be different, like how to stand out, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's authentic to them?
Everything has to be authentic to you. So your marketing is based around you, your market, and the demographic that you want to attract. So it has to be customized. If I give exactly the same marketing system, the same marketing plan to Joe in Orlando that I give to, Sally in Toronto, it may work for Joe in Orlando, but it won't work at all for Sally in Toronto because people are human lie detectors. And if there's something that feels off and there's something that feels fake or doesn't feel real or authentic, they will immediately, and it's just like, you see it all the time on like TikTok now, like people just get the ick. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, something about this just doesn't feel right. Like this person's like, this person gives me the heebie jeebies. And that's what we see so often in real estate marketing is we see these like overproduced, overly over the top, like just too much real estate videos that people think, oh, well, I spent all this time or all this money. And it's just like, just sit down and talk to the camera. Just be a real person. You don't have to put on this huge show. The number one thing that is going to get people results is going to be target demographic or having a niche. So a human-based niche. I say niche, I'm Canadian. So I
I
said
say
niche the
niche
first
too.
time. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So same. Um, so you have to you have to have a niche. And most people fight me on this, and then they try to do it without one, and then they end up with generic marketing that looks like everyone else's. But the way that I teach niching down is it has to be based on a human transition. So people move because their current situation, their current location, their current property type does not serve them, or they think that it will be better if they have a bigger house, have a smaller house, have a house with a backyard, or in a better school district. Like there's a reason why people move. People don't just move because they feel like it one day. It's not fun. And so we have to understand for that target demographic, what is the thing that's driving their move? So the thing that we need to focus on are pains, problems, fears, desires. And all of the marketing can be built around that. And we teach a 9-point psychological journey from stranger to client. So all of this comes down to being able to take someone early on in their journey where it's like they're problem aware, but they're not yet at the information gathering stage. This is how you fill a pipeline. I think so often people are like, oh, I don't have anyone in my pipeline, but people don't define pipeline correctly. Someone in a pipeline is 6 months out, and you may not even know that this person is 6 months out. They might not even know that this person is that they are 6 months out. The idea is that you have a large enough audience, or you're creating enough relationship with this audience. This is all about creating relationships at scale. You're building enough of a relationship without even needing to talk to them. I have people who will send our agents referrals who've never worked with them. They just follow them on Instagram. And they'll be like, their mom will reach out and be like, oh yeah, my daughter Sally, like she follows you on Instagram and she told me that I absolutely had to work with you. And it's because they've created this relationship that is as high up as a referral quality relationship. I had someone I went to, I think I coached rowing in high school. She sent me a DM the other day and she was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I just moved from Toronto to Ottawa. And I was like, oh, cool. I haven't talked to this girl in like 20 years. And I was like, cool. And she's like, I just wanted to let you know, how I found my agent. And I was like, oh yeah. And she's like, yeah, I went into your Instagram followers and I searched for Ottawa.
Oh,
And I looked at the agents that were in Ottawa that followed you on Instagram. And then I went through their profiles and figured out who I liked the best. And I reached out to them. And I think that people don't really realize how powerful that is. So all of this just comes down to, I like to break content into three major buckets. You've got authority content, you've got personal content, and then you've got social proof. And the typical real estate content that we see, the just listed, just sold, pictures of pretty houses, real estate memes, market report infographics, like things like that, that doesn't work. And I know that people hate when I say that. I always get so much pushback, but social media is not a billboard. And so many people in real estate still treat social media like it's a standalone billboard as opposed to a social networking platform. If you look at some of the biggest audiences, the biggest influencers that are emerging from any platform at the moment, a lot of those people are really good at telling stories, and they are really down to earth, and people feel connected to them because human beings make decisions emotionally before they make them logically. And so you can't only try to position yourself as an expert or as an authority and not create an emotional connection. So part of this is, really just really good marketing. All it is being able to articulate what's in the back of your ideal client's head better than they can. Right? That's when you get the, oh my gosh, I feel like you're inside my brain. Oh my gosh, are you listening to my conversations? Like, you totally get me. That is how people, especially online, choose who they want to work with. And then they back the decision up with logic, right? Does this person know what they're talking about? Did this person get their license 2 weeks ago? Right? And so a lot of it really just comes down to putting the right stuff out there and facilitating that psychological journey from stranger to client and giving them what they need to see in order to say yes to you. And that's really the answer for inbound business. People all the time, say, I love that you teach inbound and you don't teach chasing. I don't teach chase. I'm not saying that you can't create a business around chasing that works. Sure you can, but it's not the kind of business that I would want. So, why would I expect or teach something that I, at this point in my life, am unwilling to do?
Totally. So for like social media, when you're coaching, when you're teaching people,
Mm-hmm.
do you recommend they're on every platform like YouTube, TikTok, Facebook? No? Oh, okay.
No. It depends on who they want to attract, right? I see all kinds of people. Agents love YouTube right now, and they spend all this time and all this money creating all of this content, and then they have 55 followers, and their grandmother watches their videos, and they're not getting any. YouTube is a hard platform to crack. And you essentially have to become a YouTuber in order to succeed on YouTube. The only people that I believe should be creating content on YouTube are people who focus on relocation and who live in a secondary home market, because that's when I moved to the Bahamas. That's how I found my agent. Right? I looked through, like, what is life like? What is the real estate process like? Those are the videos that I watched about the island that I moved to, and then the agent that was producing those kinds of videos. If you are selling people from same market to same market, they're not going to look for you on YouTube. So I think that it's really important that you understand who the target demographic is, and then you choose your platforms according to that. We have agents who are doing phenomenally on LinkedIn because they specialize in young professionals. But if you are working with seniors or downsizers, why would you post on LinkedIn? They're not on that platform. And if your content is good enough and niche down enough and the messaging is correct, then all you need to do is be on, like, upsizers, Facebook, Instagram, maybe TikTok. But the thing with TikTok is you can't convert off of TikTok. So you have to grow the audience on TikTok and then move them to either email or Instagram to actually convert them, because of the way that the For You page works. So a lot of the time when it comes to choosing a platform, I would rather that you do email, Facebook and Instagram, or email, Facebook and LinkedIn, or, email and YouTube and Facebook really, really well, and dominate those platforms. I mean, email is always going to be a phenomenal source. So many people, we went through a period like a couple years ago where everyone was like, email is dead. And the reality is that email is the only list you own. every other list that you have, every other audience that you have can disappear overnight. And email, if your emails are good and you're getting into a primary inbox, your open rates are going to be somewhere between 35 and 40%. And you're not getting that visibility on any platform, on any other platform other than email. You can still make multi seven figures from growing a really solid email list. So email is always going to be, whatever social media platforms, whatever digital platforms, we're always going to drive to email.
That's great. Yeah, because I think a lot of people don't think about like how tenuous social media can be. You just, you aggravate the meta AI one day and then suddenly you're locked out.
Yeah, totally. And all this stuff about around like the TikTok ban, like what's going to happen with TikTok? All these people who put
Yes.
all of their time, energy, and money into growing this audience on TikTok and didn't diversify it, they're now in a panic trying to move that audience to Instagram, where if they just had kind of grown their email list, I would rather that your email list is larger than any other audience that you have. I have my audience is spread out over mostly Facebook and Instagram. So Facebook, Instagram, and I have a Facebook group. And my Facebook group is where I do the majority of my organic marketing on Facebook. It's not on my business page or on my personal profile. But my email list is larger than both of those combined. And it's on purpose. Like absolutely anything that I can do to drive to my email list and increase the subscriptions to my email is, and I'll send an email before I'll make a post, because my email list it's going to get in front of more people than even in my Facebook group.
Oh, I think that's great because I do think people are probably sleeping on the email list.
Yeah.
Jess, you end your book with a chapter on mindset. So as we're winding down, I want to ask you, like, what is the biggest like mindset things that you find you're coaching with agents over and over and over?
I think that focus. There's a lot of people in real estate who are relatively entrepreneurial and have a lot of shiny object syndrome. There's a lot of mixing and matching. There's a lot of watching what other people are doing. And I don't think that serves anyone. I think that knowing what you're building and why you're building it and ruthlessly going after that thing. There's a lot of programs out there that have one idea of what success looks like. And I think that's really dangerous, because someone may go through this whole exercise and then end up with a business 5 years down the road and think, this isn't what I want. So there's a reverse engineering that has to happen with every single person so that we make sure that we're advising and we're building towards what they want. We have people in our programs who are building to sell. They're like, I got 3 to 5 more years, and then I want to be able to maximize the valuation of this business so that I can sell it. Now, traditionally, when I was a young lady, you could sell a database. You can't do that anymore, right? So what do people buy? They buy intellectual property and systems, team, onboarding procedures, like the unsexy stuff, right? Marketing systems. And so we make sure with those people that, yes, we teach that to everyone, but we make sure with those specific people that like we're creating the highest valuation possible with those people in the shortest period, in the shortest amount of time possible. Then we have other people who are like, I want to make $2 million a year, but I don't want to do any transacting. Great. So we have to make a plan and reverse engineer what that's actually going to look like to get you completely out of production. We also have other agents who are like, hey, I've built my entire business in San Diego, but I want to move to Costa Rica. Great. Let's build the team and the systems and everything that we need in San Diego so that you can run it remotely, right? So every single person's end result looks a little different. And so building something that looks the same for each of those people, 1 out of 100 people is going to be happy. So it has to be this reverse engineering process. And therefore, you can't look at what anyone else is doing because everyone else doesn't have what you want. And so it has to be built and customized and focused on ultimately what it is that you want to build and what you want your life to look like and what your ideal calendar looks like. And I'm the perfect example of that, right? Like I live in the Bahamas. I live on a small island in the Bahamas. The only thing that will get me off of this island is a speaking engagement that is like highly worth it for me, right? I book 6 to 7 speaking engagements a year. That's it. And those are the only reasons why I leave. The rest of my time, I'm here, I'm looking at the ocean, I'm working from my computer, and like that was the life that I knew that I wanted 15 years ago. So it's really about like building towards what that actually looks like. And by no means am I perfect. I got off track at one point. I bought the like house in Toronto that was like expected of me, the 7,000 square foot, like, you know, huge house with the indoor pool that I thought that like, you know, the people around me expected me to have. And partway through renovating it, I looked at my husband and I was like, what are we doing? What are we like, what are we doing? We made a couple $1 million like detour off of what we really should have been doing, and we figured out how to make it work, and we moved like literally halfway through that renovation. We moved to the Bahamas. We like caught ourselves in the moment. We were like, we made a mistake, we need to right this as quickly as possible. And now my mom, my dad, my aunt, my brother live in that house.
Oh,
So but I didn't allow that mistake to and again, I think that it was like the ego account thing, right? Like I thought that that was what was kind of expected of me with the business that I had. And then I realized that it wasn't what we wanted, and that wasn't that wasn't the end result or the end vision that we had talked about. So we pivoted and we adjusted really, really fast.
I think that's really important to share because I think so many people fall into kind of the sunken cost fallacy,
Yeah.
and they just get stuck. They would have kept renovating. They would have maybe never
Oh,
moved
I
to the
finished the
Bahamas.
renovation. My
Oh, well, yeah.
parents live in a beautiful house, but it wasn't for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? It wasn't right for me, and we found a way to like make it work, but you know, it could have been, if we had allowed it to be to, it could have been that mistake that kept us from doing what ultimately we want to do. Now, I don't have kids. I don't want kids, but um, I hear a lot when people say, "Oh my gosh, you live in the Bahamas, you must not have kids." Because I think a lot of people also use their children as a reason why they can't. Now, my best friend, her name is also Jess. She lives on this island down the street. She owns her own company. So does her husband. And they have 2 kids who are 5 and 7 that are growing up on this island. They're originally from California. Then they lived in Nashville, and now they live in Eleuthera, Bahamas. And these kids are the happiest, most well-adjusted, like they're living the dream. Her son will come into my house to have dinner and empty his pockets, and there's like 3 hermit crabs in his pocket, right? Like he's having the time of his life. And so I think a lot of the time people will make excuses as to why they can't. And if you want something bad enough, you can make everything else work, including making sure that your kids are going to have like the best, most epic life.
That's wonderful. So, Jess, if people want to work with you in the
Hmm.
listings lab, if they want to follow you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I would say Instagram is a really easy place to find me. My Instagram handle is just Jess Lenouvel. So first, last name. And I would say the best place to connect with me would probably be email. It's just Jess at the listings with an S lab.com. Just send me an email and tell me a little bit about your business, and I'll let you know whether or not I have something that might work.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes. And everybody should definitely check out Jess's book, More Money, Less Hustle, Becoming the Seven-Figure Real Estate Agent. I think it's a great resource that you can come back to time and time and again. Jess, thank you so much for
Thank
all that
you.
you do. Thank you for writing this amazing book. And thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to the Closing Table podcast, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler. Please make sure you are following this podcast either on Apple or Spotify. And if you're part of our YouTube audience, make sure you've hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to leave us a review or a comment. It helps us find more amazing listeners like you. Talk to you next time.